Hello, Alex here, and today we're going to talk about the Pentax 45mm f4 ultra-wide lens for the Pentax 6-7 system. Let's get into it. Let's start off with an overview of the lens. The lens itself is 58mm long and 92mm in diameter, so it's pretty short and stocky. The front of the lens bears an 82mm filter thread because it is such a wide lens. The lens will attach to any of the Pentax 6-7 or 6x7 cameras using the inner bayonet, and it can also be adapted onto various other systems. It comes in at 486 grams naked and 541 grams with the front and rear caps attached. This is a prime lens, so it does not zoom and it has a fixed focal length of 45mm. In terms of diagonal field of view, it's about equivalent to a 22mm lens on a 35mm format camera, or the vertical field of view is equivalent to that of about a 19mm lens. So this lens takes on the role of the ultra-wide lens within the Pentax 6-7 lineup. I love this focal length, but it's not something I would use every day, so I don't have quite as many pictures to show off in this review as I do in my others. I purchased my copy of the lens used for €340, but that was without the lens hood, for which I paid an extra €30. The front lens cap is unfortunately the kind of outer push fit type rather than a normal modern pinchy type, which may annoy some people. Additionally, the lens hood attaches by pinching onto the inside of the front filter threads, as there is no bayonet for lens hoods on these lenses. Unfortunately, because of the wide field of view of this lens, the lens hood itself is quite shallow, and that's just unavoidable here. This is the widest angle rectilinear lens within the Pentax 6-7 lineup. There is only a single lens which has a wider field of view, and that is the 35mm fisheye lens. So if you don't want a fisheye look, this is the widest lens you can get on this system. Additionally, as a 45mm focal length lens, if you run 35mm film through your Pentax 6-7 camera while using this lens, you get a panoramic view with a 45mm focal length, which is akin to the Hasselblad X-Pan. So as a result, this is a surprisingly common way that people knock off the X-Pan look on medium format. The lens has a maximum aperture starting at f4, which narrows down to at most f22. Similarly to the 135mm f4 macro lens, there are full stop clicks at the extreme ends of the range, so f4 to f5.6 and then f16 to f22, but then you have half stops in between, which is a bit strange. The aperture itself is comprised of 8 straight aperture blades yielding octagonal out of focus highlights. The maximum aperture of f4 isn't mind-blowing by any means, but for such a wide lens on such a large format, it is actually pretty impressive. This makes focusing and composing in your viewfinder pretty easy. Speaking of focusing, this lens can focus down to 37 centimeters, yielding a maximum magnification of 0.17x or reproduction ratio of about 1:6. This is well above average for such a fast, wide-angle lens on such a large format, so the lens deserves props for that. When focusing down to minimum focus distance from infinity, the overall focus throw is about 120 degrees, which is decent for such a wide-angle lens, and in doing so, the lens extends by about 1 centimeter. As with all Pentax 6-7 lenses, it is manual focus only and there is no autofocus. The focusing ring turns pretty smoothly, but with a decent level of resistance. Not so much that you're going to struggle to turn the focusing ring by any means, but it is tighter than the other 6x7 lenses I've tried. I haven't seen any issues with ghosting, flare under normal shooting conditions, or field curvature, which is impressive once again for such a wide-angle lens on such a large format. Flare can be induced and you can get a severe loss of contrast when you shoot directly into the sun under very high contrast scenarios, like this shot here. No lens from this era is going to perform well under that scenario, so I'm not too worried about that, but it is worth bringing up. However, shooting on a bright sunny day, it's generally no problem at all, which is expected of a lens designed with such a wide angle that's quite often going to have the sun in the frame. On that note, the centering of my copy, like all the other lenses I have for this camera, is absolutely flawless. Firstly, the size and weight. For such a wide lens on a 6x7 format, it is actually extremely lightweight and compact. Secondly, the sharpness when stopped down is absolutely incredible. From even f5.6, definitely f8, you're getting tack sharpness corner to corner. It's beautiful in that regard. Next, the wide angle of view is extremely useful for the right circumstances, the right shot, and you can get a really dramatic sense of scale and perspective that you can't get with your normal, standard lens, your 105-ish on 6x7 or your 80mm on 6x6 or 645. It's much more dramatic and it gives your shots a sense of gravitas if you want to get really artsy about it. Lastly, although not a macro lens by any means, the 37cm close focusing distance is pretty good for what this lens is. Firstly, as I mentioned earlier, this lens takes 82mm filters. They are big, they are expensive, and some filters may not be available as big as 82mm. Additionally, if you have other lenses in the lineup like the 105, the 90, you're gonna either have to get a second set of filters or deal with step-up rings on your smaller filter thread lenses, which is just an extra level of annoyance. Obviously, this lens would probably not have been possible with a 67mm filter thread, but them's the breaks. Secondly and thirdly, because these do relate to each other, the lens is not very sharp wide open at f4, and it's not very sharp at its minimum focusing distance. Here is the absolute worst shot I've ever taken on this lens. This is wide open at f4 at the minimum focusing distance. You can see where I've focused in the lower right here. Nothing is really sharp. It looks horrible, and the out of focus bokeh is absolutely disgusting. This is the first shot that I've taken on a Pentax 6.7 lens that I would genuinely call horrible. This is definitely not a lens to be used wide open, close up to get beautiful bokeh like something like the Fuji 16mm f1.4 is known for. However, if you stop down to even just f5.6, so just one stop, you do see a massive boost in sharpness when shooting at close focusing distances. Here's a picture I shot of Trixie, which I did admittedly underexpose to maintain a hand-holdable shutter speed on ISO 100 film. The sharpness is a hell of a lot better in this shot at f5.6 than in the previous shot at f4. There's really no comparison. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video where I reviewed the 45mm f4 for the Pentax 6.7 system. In my opinion, this is essentially an f5.6 45mm lens from which you get the benefit of f4's light transmission when it comes to focusing and composing. If you want the widest lens you can possibly get for this system that isn't a fisheye lens, this is your only choice. For most people, I would actually recommend the 55mm f4 instead because its 24 to 28mm equivalent field of view is much more versatile on a daily basis. If you like this video and enjoy what I do, please consider subscribing or checking out my Patreon where the tiers start at just €1 per month. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at shaka1277 for new pictures every single day. That's it for this video because, as I said, I don't have too many pictures taken with this lens that I would consider worth showing. Stay safe and bye bye for now.